First, I want to say thank you guys for joining our session today. We're going to give a big overview of what the hackathon is about, as well as introduce Velo for those of you who are new to the platform. And at the end, you guys will have a chance to ask questions about either the hackathon, the platform, as we're hosting this during our office hours, which is what we normally give everyone opportunity to ask about their projects that they're working on Velo. So let's start by introducing ourselves. My name is Thomas, and my first programming language was actually Scratch, which is drag and drop programming. And this I learned back in middle school, and that inspired me to study computer science in college. Then I went back and I actually ended up teaching middle school students CS through the same exact program, since Scratch is still around. And today I'm a developer advocate at Wix.
And my name's Anthony. My first programming language was actually VBA. I am a self-taught programmer. I've been doing it for quite a while, just learned from messing around at work to try to make my life easier. And then I realized that I enjoyed working with people a lot and programming. So I've been doing DevRel basically since 2016. And yeah, I'm a developer at Wix.
So we're going to start with the big question, which is, what is Velo? And if you look at Velo, what you'll find is that we're a full stack development platform that allows you to build professional web apps. And some of the main advantages of using Velo are that you have a wide set of integrated tools that you can use to create your website. You have the ability to rapidly deploy your site, so you don't have to worry about configuration at all, because it's all hosted in a serverless platform. And on top of that, you have built-in security and scalability. So again, the benefit of being in a serverless platform is that you won't have to worry about deployment at all. And this gives you the ability to take an idea and run with it and create like rapid MVPs for your business. Now, some of the features that make Velo stand out are the fact that you have a professional UI builder when you're creating things on Velo. So unlike other web stacks that you may be used to, Velo allows you to create your website using what you see is what you get interface. So drags that are built and onto your page and quickly design exactly the way it's going to look on the site. On top of that, when you write JavaScript within Velo, all of the functions that you write are hosted within the platform. So that means you don't need to do any setup for creating APIs or accessing external databases or any of the integrations that are built in. We also have an integrated database, which is collections based. Which is document based, kind of like MongoDB. And this allows you to save data within your website without having to spin up some sort of database. We have out of the box monitoring solutions. So that means that when you're building your site, you have a whole set of tools that will allow you to debug whatever happens on both front end and back end of. And lastly, since you have the power of JavaScript, you have access to third-party APIs and NPM packages that you can use to add functionality to your site. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through a short demo of what it looks like to turn on the Velo platform when you're building your site. And something to note is that when you want to use the Velo API, you can access it whether you're using the Wix editor or editor X. So these two images show what it would look like on either editor, but basically you would go to the top where it says dev mode and just click on turn dev mode on, and you would have access to the Velo API. So we're actually going to do that now. So we're going to head over to a site that we can work on together here. So this right here is actually an example of a template that's available on the Wix editor, but you can actually use a blank template, which would allow you to completely configure the way the site is going to look visually if you wanted to. And right now we're just in the Wix Classic editor. So whatever you see here is what you'll see once you make your first site. And we're going to click on the top where it says dev mode, and then click on turn on dev mode. So once you hit that button, you'll see that a whole new interface will open up. So we have 3 main components here that we'll talk about and see how we can use. So this right here is something that's called the sidebar. And on the sidebar, you have access to all of the different pages that you can write within your website. And you can click on it to either access code or code for a page. Now, down here, you can see that since we clicked on masterpage.js, we open up on the code panel the JavaScript for that particular .js file. And then on the right here is something called the properties panel. So basically, when we click on anything that's on this page right here, which is like a live preview of what our page might look like, you can see that on the side down here, you'll see a set of properties that you can use. So let's expand this. And you can see that right here, we have an ID, which represents the ID for that element we just clicked on, as well as a few event handlers where we can like easily add functions to that particular element that we just clicked on. Now, let's go back to our page. And let's say we wanted to add some text down here. The way to do that is by hitting add. And we could just click on any element that we want to add. And you can see here that there's a whole bunch of different options, but we're going to click on text. And let's add a paragraph. So I'm going to align it. And then you can see that I have a paragraph here and it just has some default text. And then associated to that element that I just added to the page, we have an ID called text70. So we're going to go back to our code panel down here. And what we're going to do is we're going to write some basic code in JavaScript to make it so that when the page loads, it actually changes the default text right here. So to do this, we're going to use something called $W, which is the main selector that you can use to edit things on a Wix site. So we're going to say $W. And then we're going to write inside of here text70, because that's the name of the element that we just added. And we're going to use the property .text is equal to hello world. And I just wrote this code inside of this $W.onReady function, which basically represents what happens after the page fully loads. So it's basically a lifecycle method that once the page is loaded, it runs whatever code that's in here. So we're just going to hit save. And once we save the page, when we hit preview, we should see the default text change. So we're going to hit preview now. And you can see that when the page actually loaded, the text changed in here. And that was powered by the JavaScript that we wrote. Now, there's a whole bunch of functions that you can use that are like associated to all of the Wix elements. And we're going to give you resources at the end of this talk so you can see some of the different functionalities that you can use. But this was just a very simple example meant to show you how you can use JavaScript to actually enhance your website and create like dynamic functionality. So let's go back to our slides now. And now that we know a little bit about like what Velo does and what's its use case, we're going to talk about our hackathon now. So games on Velo may seem like something that you wouldn't really build. And just because Velo is primarily built for professional web apps doesn't mean that you can't build a game on it. So by joining this hackathon, you'll get an opportunity to learn about some of the different APIs that we talked about earlier today, and also really test out your creativity to build something that shouldn't have been made on Velo. So we're gonna see, like if you click on our DevPost link, you can see some examples of games that have been built on Velo. And one of the examples that's highlighted here is actually a Space Invader game that was built using manipulating like the SVG element that's built into Velo to create a display for the game. So there's actually, using the built-in tools, there's actually ways to create a game out of it. And we want to give you an opportunity to really explore it to see if you can make something like that. So let's talk about the requirements for this hackathon. So first thing is that your submission must be a game. This could be single player or multiplayer on one device or multiple devices. And when we say game, we're referring to something that is some sort of challenge, it's some sort of competition, there's a way to keep track of points. And we on purpose kept it open to make it so that you can really use your creativity to create a game based on like whatever requirements you think would define a game. So we have things that are more traditional games like Space Invaders, but we also have an example there actually created by someone who's here named Max, which is our creative writing battle, which gives writers an opportunity to write short stories and play to win in a competition against each other. Next, your game must be developed and hosted on the Velo development platform. So that means you can either use the Wix editor or editor X. Both of them give you access to Velo. Next, your game UI must be developed using Wix editor elements. And these could be native or custom. So what that means is when you take an element that's built into the editor, those are known as native elements, and they have their own APIs associated to them. But if you want to add functionality for something that's not built in, you can use something called a custom element, which gives you access to an API that allows you to create web components. And using those web components, you can insert anything onto your page that isn't built in natively. And lastly, and this is an important one, it must use at least 2 integrated apps, services, or APIs on the Velo development platform. So what that means is you use some of the functionalities that are built in, and there's no specification on which ones you should use or how you should use it, but the requirement is that you check out the Velo reference and use at least 2 of those integrated services or APIs. And some examples for how that might work are, let's say, for example, project A, you're creating a multiplayer game that tracks data across the different players that are there. With the Wix Members app, you can keep track of which players are registered, and you can also get data and save it with the Wix Data API and associate it to those members. And now another example might be the Wix Data API and the real-time API. So let's say you were saving scores for your game. You could do that using the Wix Data API and the integrated database. And then if your game is multiplayer, you could integrate Wix real-time to allow all the players to communicate with each other, like while the game is running live. Now, these are the main requirements, and we're gonna get into like how we'll be judging these submissions, but I wanna give you guys an opportunity now. Do you guys have any questions about these main requirements for the hackathon?
There's a few questions in chat. I've answered most of them. One of them I was in the process of answering, but maybe we could just answer it live. Essentially, the question is from Colo, is an HTML component a custom component? They are both custom, but custom elements and HTML elements are slightly different. I'll provide links to both in the chat for more information. And if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to ask.
So to Steven's question, custom components are actually a little different than iframes because they're basically an implementation of web components. But iframes are also available on Wix, but I wouldn't recommend it because it won't give you full integration with like the Velo API compared to if you use what's it called, an iframe. And yes, there'll be a general Q&A at the end of the Zoom session.
Yeah. You can ask questions now too. We're pretty open.
To Joris's question, yeah, you can host it outside of Wix. The only thing is that we would then ask to see the code for that custom element. But when you create a custom element, it allows you to host directly like on the Velo platform or outside, like using a CDN. Also, if you're using custom elements, you would need to request access to it. So we have a form that you can ask about in the Hackathon Help section if you have questions about that. We do recommend using native elements because we want to see, and we'll talk about that soon, we want to see really creative use of the stuff that's built in already, because we've already seen some examples of games that can be created just using the native elements, and we'd love to have like a catalog of more games like that. Okay, so if anyone has any other questions, we can ask about it at the end, where you guys will get another opportunity. So what we're going to talk about now is the criteria that we're going to use to judge your game. Now, all three of these categories are weighted equally, so that's why you don't see any percentage. So they're all equally important. And the first one is, like we've been mentioning, is innovation. So the question is, does your game use the Velo's integrated app services and APIs in a creative way? And how creative and unique is this project? Now, the example that I showed you earlier, using SVGs, they were able to use the SVG element within Wix to create a display for their game. That would score very high in innovation because it's not normally something that's used in that way, and it's using something that's completely integrated into Wix. There's a lot of other ways that you can use the integrated APIs creatively. For example, if you have a multiplayer game where messages are sent between players or scores or actions are sent between players, you can use the Wix real-time API and implement your own sort of messaging system for that game to make it live. Next, the gameplay, user experience, and user interface. So since we're all building games, we of course want them to be fun. So the big question is your game enjoyable to play? And then on top of that, we want to make sure that it offers good user experience. So is it easy to understand how to play? Is it efficient in terms of like, does it use the website well, the way it's like organized? And is it visually appealing? On top of that, another thing to consider is that games these days can be played across desktop and mobile. So is the user experience as good on desktop as in mobile? Now, we know that not all games have the ability to be played on every single platform, but these are just things to think about when considering the user experience of your game. And next, the use of Velo APIs and integrated services. So does your game use a range of Velo features? And are the features that are used showcasing how you can use Velo to scale across different use cases? So if you build a custom solution, but there's an integrated Velo API that you can use, we would score a project that uses the integrated API higher because it's showing how you can use the tools that are already built in order to like build whatever requirement we want. So that's why when we in the motto of this hackathon, we said harness your creativity. We really meant it because you will have to really look into the different integrated APIs to see how you can use what's already available to you. And then if you need like additional third-party APIs, you can bring them into your project. So these are the three main judging criteria that we're going to be using when we take a look at your submissions. Are there any questions about the judging criteria that we can answer?
One question that I think would be good to repeat for the recording is essentially, the question was, what if I link an external website using HTML components? Is that valid? And I think for the judging criteria, yes, it is valid, but you need to keep in mind the rest of the criteria such that the game can't exist before the hackathon. It needs to be made for the hackathon. And then also the first bullet point is, you need to use some Velo APIs or other Wix integrations within the project as well.
So yeah, we'll have another session where you guys will have the ability to ask questions. But now let's talk a little bit about some resources that you guys can use. So the main resource that I think you guys should refer to while building your project is, of course, the Velo reference. So this is our go-to API reference for everything that's built into.
So yeah, we're going to provide links to the Velo APIs and all the other documentation that you need. It's available on the Discord. It's also available on the DevPost website for the hackathon. So go check those out if you need any information. And we also have a help channel within our Discord that if you encounter any questions or issues, you can go ahead and ask there as well. Yeah, but we very much appreciate everybody listening to the hackathon kickoff. Unfortunately, Thomas is having audio and computer issues at the moment. But yeah, we're really looking forward to the project everybody has. And if anyone has any other questions that they want to ask, you can feel free to ask now. We have some questions. Let's see. Tippy is asking that they made a game for fun as a project when they were learning web dev. This was a long time ago, but it was a funny idea. Now they've got a team together and want to use Wix to make a new version. Yeah, I would say that's fine, as long as your code is based, like if you have the old idea and you want to re-implement that old idea in new code, that's perfectly fine. Since you're starting from scratch. Yeah, absolutely. And then we have another question here. SKSRE says that they've read through the forums and have determined that it's not currently possible to get the XMY position of an element. Is this functionality that will be added soon, or is there a workaround? That is a good question. I actually don't know. I'll need to get back to you on that one. Can you post that question in the help channel and we'll try to address that. Now there's another question. Akash is asking, does a basic game using Velo give a good chance to win a hackathon, or do we need to make games that are scalable or big ones? Obviously the more effort that we can see put into the game, the better it's produced. That's going to score a bit higher with us when judging. But of course, look at all the criteria on the website, make sure that's being met. And then after that, yes, the overall quality and feature set and everything else about the project will probably have some weight if there's a tie between projects. Steven's asking that we only get access to a few CSS properties on Wix. Why can't we use them all? That's the way Wix works. Since Wix is a WYSIWYG editor, some of the design decisions are just that way, and that's not going to change before the hackathon.
That's an alternative. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, your audio is just cracking on quite a lot.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe just move your microphone a little away from your face.
Oh, it's the webcam itself. Sorry about
okay.
Yeah, it's still bad. It's not good.
Yeah, you can just add whatever you're gonna add.
Oh, so I was gonna say that if you wanted to control CSS properties, all you need to do is create a custom element in that case, because you wouldn't be able to control it through CSS, but you would be able to control the DOM element itself, and you would be able to manipulate it that way.
Yeah, you would be able to control the CSS of that element itself. You wouldn't be able to control the CSS of the rest of the page, but anything within the DOM element of that custom element would work. Tippy's asking if anybody wants to do user interviews and playtesting. If you want to go find people to help on your project in whatever way you want, maybe have them join your team for that too. You can go ahead and ask in the Hackathon channel on the Discord, and it'll be in there. And then, people who are interested can answer you. I'll actually paste the Discord link in the chat in a moment once I'm done answering all these questions. Max Bjork says, is it okay to use Upwork to have artists create some sort of art with them not being part of the team? That's entirely up to you. As long as you own the art and have the rights to use it, you can use it however you want in your project. But of course, we aren't necessarily saying you need to spend any money on this. We're only asking that people hack. But of course, as long as you own the art, that's up to you. Let's see. Next question. How finished does your project need to be? For instance, have assets used across the project to save on design resources. If you're reusing assets, again, as long as you own them, that's perfectly fine. I don't even know how we would know if you were using them previously. Reusing assets sounds fine to me as long as they're yours and you're allowed to use them. Tippy's asking what the maximum team size is and is asking if it's 4. And yes, that's correct. Maximum team size is 4. SKS Ari, is there a way to determine the refresh rate of the site? Additionally, is there any way to cap or uncap the refresh rate of the platform, the frame rate? I'm not actually sure. That's a very good question. I would say you should post that one in the help channel on Discord too, and we'll check. I don't believe that there's a way to do that. I'm actually curious how that works in web browsers in general. I truly don't know. That's a good question though. Is there integration tools of Wix Velo APIs with game engines like Unity or Unreal? No, there is not, but the way you would integrate something produced in something like Unity would be to compile it such that it could be run on the web and then put it into a custom element. Not too familiar with those game development platforms, but if they have web as a target, then you can probably go ahead and do it. And what are some challenges you faced in organizing this hackathon? I don't know. The hackathon's been going pretty good. That's a really cool question. I would say that we haven't really had too many challenges. Everything's been running pretty smoothly. We have a great team at DevPost who has lots of experience running these hackathons. So yeah, we've not really faced too many challenges yet. Yeah, we're looking forward though to seeing everybody's projects. And I'm sure that might be one of the most challenging parts is figuring out which projects are the best, because we're probably going to have a lot of projects and a lot of criteria, but really looking forward to it. Welcome. Oh, got another question coming in. Can I create a custom API that integrates with Wix game engines? Is that allowed to integrate a new feature to Wix? You can consider as my contribution. Akash, can you clarify that question a little bit? Basically, there wouldn't be any changes we could make to Wix itself as far as features, but anything you can code in JavaScript and then put in a custom element on your own website on Wix or Velo would work just fine. And of course, as mentioned before, you still need to use Velo APIs and other things. And as you can see in some of the examples, they actually get pretty creative. I think the Space Invaders example that manipulates SVGs in order to render on-screen graphics in a 2D form is actually really, really cool. So those types of things are encouraged. But yeah, if I've misunderstood the question though, just let me know.
So I want to thank you guys for joining today. We're still going to have some questions, but I just wanted to say thank you and sorry about the technical issues at the 11th hour that I had there, but I think my mic is working again.
Yeah, your mic is sounding a lot better. Yeah, we can actually go ahead and even walk through. Akash had a clarification. I meant that if I can create a tool that integrates to create games with Wix and game engines, creating a tool itself would not be a game, but if you create a game using such a tool, that would be really cool and interesting to see. Okay, and I think that's most of the questions so far. Of course, this also is our regular office hours, so if you have questions for a project, you can ask those, and in which case we'll probably stop the recording. But one other thing we could go through right now, as the questions do seem to be dying down, is we can actually talk a little bit about an actual game that runs on Wix, kind of a simple one, so you can see how this types of things work. Do any additional questions go in the Discord Hackathon Help? Yes, if they are hackathon questions and specific to the hackathon, then you should ask them there. If you're having a coding issue while working on the hackathon, I would say just ask in the regular hackathon channel would probably be the best way to approach that. But yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen so we can, just 1 second. Share screen. All right, can everybody see my screen? Cool. So here we have a little fun Tic Tac Toe game. This is just a very simple game where you play Tic Tac Toe. And I wanted to just walk through kind of how this was made. This is an example too, so there are definitely some ways you can make this game even better than it currently is, but just to give people an idea of how you might leverage some of the Velo APIs in order to do this, we're going to walk through it. So at the top, of course, we have a few things that we're importing. We have some game logic in a public file. For those who aren't aware, you can have public and backend files. So essentially, if you have code that you reuse throughout code, you don't need to go ahead and write it on your home page. You can go ahead and properly structure your project like you would in any other development environment and actually break them out so that those functions that you need to reuse are actually in their own file and you can go ahead and import them. Then we're also importing some files from MobX, which is an NPM package that is an event-based state manager. I personally haven't used MobX too much, so when I talk through the code, I might not know everything about it. But over here, if you go to your packages tab and you go to NPM and you click plus, you can install quite a lot of packages from NPM, MobX being one of them. So you have a lot of flexibility and power when you're working with Velo just on the tools you can use to accomplish this. You don't need to roll all your own code. If you can import it somewhere, then go ahead. That's how programming should work. Then next, you'll see we've imported some stuff from our backend. like mentioned before, and this is actually one of the things that could potentially be improved with this project, but backend code runs exactly where you would expect it on the backend. So if you have parts of your game where you don't want to trust the user to tell you whether they've won the game or not, or whether or not they've made a valid move in your game or done something to that effect, you can actually send the data to the backend, and then the backend can evaluate whether or not it's correct and then send something back to the client. So that's how the backend works there, like anything else. And then it's really nice too, because once you've made and exported a function from the backend, you can go ahead and call that from the front end without having to worry about how the actual communication happens. Velo just kind of handles all that for you. Tippy's asking if the backend is secure / invisible to the client. Yes, the backend is entirely invisible to the client, and the backend is secure as long as you code it correctly. So it's like any other backend on any other website. If you had, for example, though, without getting too off topic, one thing we do have is a secrets backend. So import Wix secrets backend. And then we have a way to, and you can go ahead and Google this or ask online. We have a way to get secrets from the backend, so you don't actually have to store them in plain code. If you had, for example, an API key where you were querying a third-party API to do something, you can go ahead and store that somewhere, and then you could get it just live on your backend rather than having to hard code it. So that's how that would work. And then we'll come back over to home. And then lastly, the last thing we're importing here is our Wix real-time API. This is a way for, you can kind of think of it like WebSockets. I'm not sure that the implementation itself is actually WebSockets, and may or may not be. But the way it works is your client user can subscribe to a channel and listen for events coming in a push method. Your backends can just be pushing messages to your clients. So those are some of the fun things we've imported and how some of the basic things in Velo work, hopefully without getting too off topic. So then any good game has a state. So we're tracking the state here, and here is basically using mobx observable in order to keep track of that and keep the state updated. So I won't go over this in too much detail, but essentially what we have here is a bunch of code that's managing our local state and what to do when a move happens. So for example, here in mobx, it's subscribed to this bit of state, this channel, and whenever a move is handled, then this stuff happens. Yeah, I'm not going to do a good job explaining exactly how mobx works because I don't personally use it that much for my event management, but it is very good. I know a lot of people that like it. Then we're going to go ahead and evaluate when our turn is over. And actually, we're essentially managing additional state here. We're working in our logic of how the program knows which player is playing and what the state of the program is. This is code actually that, even though it's in the front end right now, could potentially be in the back end because we don't really want our local clients evaluating this. But of course, there's considerations there too, where you could also argue that maybe this code doesn't need to be in the back end because me as the winning client won't be able to lie to the other client. Me as the one client in this game won't be able to lie to the other client / player and tell them about an invalid state because they'll be executing the code too. But that's something to keep in mind. There are some things that you'll want to run in the backend and to not trust the client. So for example, if the client was able to report to the backend that, hey, I'm the winner of this, and then the backend just blindly trusts that and goes and tells the other client, that's not going to work out well in your game. Then we just have a few more functions for handling events that happen in the game, resetting the board. And then lastly, like I mentioned before, then we have this kind of way to communicate data to and from the backend using the real-time API. So we have this send data command that we've defined over here. So if we come over to our backend, our real-time file, and we see that we're just basically taking the data, accepting it blindly, not doing any checks on it right now, which we probably should. And then we're able to use the real-time API to go ahead and publish that data to the other client. And yeah, so that's basically how this game works. As you'll notice, it is very simple. Some things are handled on the front end when they could potentially be handled on the back end. This game is also only assuming that there's 2 players in one game at any given time. If you have 3 players that join, all of a sudden, you don't know who's who. There's quite a lot that could actually be improved here. This is just a very small example of how a game would be structured within Wix and Velo, and how you would use some of these APIs. Yeah, so that's basically it. One other API that you'll probably want to use for keeping track of some of your data within your game is Wix Data, where you can go ahead and, as Thomas mentioned before, use content collections to actually persist your data in much the same way you would expect to with any other database. So yeah, that's Tic Tac Toe on Velo, and we are looking forward to seeing all the games that everybody else builds. So yeah, thank you all. And I don't think we have any other questions now. So Thomas, you think we should stop recording and then we can just turn this over to a regular chat for the remaining 15-ish minutes?
Yeah, I think that'd be good. But if you guys still have leftover questions about the hackathon, feel free to ask them now, because we're here with you.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, so I'm going to stop recording, and then I didn't forget, I'm going to paste the Discord link. Sorry, where is this stuff?